Well, I think the Twitter community is different from other things such as Facebook, where it's one continuous conversation, right? So often I will start a conversation with one of my colleagues, and you end up having other people joining in. So you really get this input that you don't necessarily get from Facebook, because it's moving along so much faster than the other one. The other one more feels like a delayed email response.
I feel like a lot of other social media is more personal connections, so I would feel odd asking someone that I have never met in person to be a Facebook friend because I feel that's a very personal connection. I feel it ends up being a lot of personal details about people's lives that they don't necessarily want to share with a purely professional connection. I find that Twitter, I'm more comfortable being friends with people or followers with people that I've never met in person, and perhaps making connections with people who I admire and would otherwise be hesitant to approach in a more informal settings.
Well, first thing I'd like to emphasize that Twitter is what you make of it. You build the Twitter community that you want and that you need. And so if there's someone that you don't want to interact with in Twitter, then you don't have to. I understand that there are gender differences where it's harder to be on social media if you're a woman, and I recognize that fact. And there's horrible things that I don't have to deal with that some women might have to tolerate. But there is clear evidence that a lot of women have been successful and gotten by on Twitter just fine. The one thing, if you compare Twitter to Facebook, I find Twitter to be far more useful and successful and positive than Facebook. Like, Facebook is where you have, your crazy, relatives and people from high school and people you might have worked with at one point that, say crazy religious or political things that are disruptive. Whereas in Twitter, you don't have that kind of thing. People might be saying that kind of thing, but you don't have to follow them if you don't want to.
So Twitter, in my opinion, is just a very different form of social media. Whereas Facebook I use to connect with family and connect with like old high school friends or whatever. Twitter is definitely the place where I connect with people on a more intellectual level. I talk to more professionals through Twitter, but it's also really fun. And I like that because Twitter is so short and concise with their 140 characters, it's almost impossible to take yourself too seriously on Twitter. Whereas Facebook and other forms of social media, you can write these long, angry, ranting diatribes. You really can't do that on Twitter, which is really nice because I'm not forced to see it if I don't want to.